What's up, everybody? Did you get to see those annoying vegans on Tristan's Primal Edge Health's live stream last night? Oh my. Were they annoying or what? Now, they're nice people, I guess. They're superficially nice, but so what, right? We are, I would hope, most of us anyway, emotionally mature people where we no longer get fooled by emotional facades or the way people seem to be, the way they relate to us emotionally, whether they're calm or aggressive or whatever. I would hope that even though obviously we have to take that into account when judging people, and don't fucking fool yourself, you're always judging people. You're always discriminating, and good for you. I would hope that we can look past the facade and not let our emotions control everything, right? I would hope that we are emotionally mature enough to be able to do that, right? So while you may have a vegan mother who is oh so nice, at least on camera, right? And maybe also nice to her children at whatever, at the park or something. But if she's feeding them a nutritionally deficient diet, how can you say that she's through and through a nice person or a nice mother, right? Because she acts nicely, right? We need to be emotionally mature enough to be able to see through other people's emotions, be able to see and differentiate between emotions and reality or logic, reason, right? Anyway, what the annoying vegans proved yet again, like many vegans, these so-called ethical vegans, is that their worldview is based in nothing but fifis, emotion. They are not emotionally mature people. It is what it is. They're children. I'm sorry, and they're in their mid-30s, maybe close to 40, going on 65. Take off all that makeup, and you'll agree with me, Anna. But that doesn't mean that they're adults, in other words. But that doesn't mean that they're emotionally mature, because they cannot make decisions. They cannot look at the world reasonably and logically. They allow their emotionality to take over everything. Their actions, right? Their emotions dictate their actions. Not reason or logic, just their fifis. And Anna made that plenty clear. Now look, Brian could be going along with Anna because he loves her, and even though, because he is a man, right? He might be able to see through how flimsy their ideology is and how emotionally immature his wife is, but he could be going along with this because he loves her and he wants to be with her. I don't know. I'm just gonna be quote unquote sexist here and give the man more credit. Um, I could be completely wrong. Maybe he's just as emotionally immature as her. Although in his case, I would say he's, if that's the case, he's a bitch, right? I'm not nice. I'm reasonable. Let me take a sip of my coffee. Anyway, so the thing that vegans always fail, generally, is in the area, and I have to keep talking about this because not enough of you are. If you're this so-called anti-vegan, why isn't this the first thing that you use to unhinge the flimsy vegan worldview, to destroy it? This is the first thing. It's so easy whenever you're having a conversation with another vegan, with a vegan, and you're against them telling you what to do. All you have to do is talk about what's subjective and what's objectively true. That's all you have to do. And you put them in their place. It's really that simple. So Anna and Brian invalidated themselves and their worldview when they admitted that morality is subjective, right? So once again, even though they believe that you have the right to determine what's moral for you the same way they determine what's moral for them, they virtue signal and they preach. And they act as if veganism was objectively morally correct, right? This is a huge conflict for most of these vegans, and it completely and utterly invalidates what it is that they're trying to do. It makes them dishonest people. Now, some of them might be blind or too dumb to realize this, but these guys aren't. They agreed that morality is subjective, while at the same time their entire channel preaches how to be objectively moral, to be vegan, right? They're dishonest. They're first and foremost not honest with themselves. And if they are not honest, what are they doing pretending to be ethical, right? Their entire worldview is in chaos. It doesn't make any sense. It's self-refuting and contradictory, right? That's it. Debate over. Veganism is dead, right? It should be. Or at the very least, once again, we realize that it's nothing but a diet. It's just a dietary preference. Don't try to put lipstick on a fucking pig, because a bitch is still ugly. Just wipe all that bullshit off and just be honest with people. And then you will have a semblance of virtue. Your worldview will, however personal, will at the very least be somewhat virtuous, if only to yourself. Because right now it's chaos. You're a walking, talking contra-fucking-diction. That's not ethical. You refute yourself, right? If the basis for everything that you say is in chaos and self-refuting, then nothing else that follows from that could be logical, reasonable, or fucking ethical. You can't have one without the other. You can't. Anyway, the audience, and myself included, and Anna and Brian wanted to move past that and just talk about the real world, right? As if you could. The practical implications of veganism and this and that. And you really can't do that, because your entire worldview, the basis for your belief, are just in shambles, right? And Tristan had a very hard time getting over that, and I can understand why. But for the sake of the conversation, here and there he got over that blatant contradiction in their worldview, and he talked about the tangible world and how veganism or meat eating manifests itself, what repercussions it has, what it is exactly, how it exists. And that's fine. But you saw this Tristan just couldn't help himself. He just kept coming back to this subjective and objective morality, because how do you just look past that, right? I'm not sure, what I think he wanted was a concession on behalf of Anna and Brian that their worldview doesn't make any sense. We don't make any sense. We just do this because we feel this way. Our feelings control our actions. We're not reasonable people. We're emotional people. And Anna made that pretty well known when she said that when she watched one of those vegan propaganda documentary flicks, what was happening at some CAFO in that flick was icky, right? It was icky. And in the comment section, I said, well, oatmeal is icky, right? Kale is icky. Don't make me, eat that shit. It's icky, right? This is her worldview. It's icky. She's not an emotionally mature person. She just isn't. It is what it is. And you can see that it comes out when she makes her little baby faces, and she's so concerned about everything, and everything seems to affect her, right? She's just so sad all the time and perturbed because she's seen the world for what it is, and she's not emotionally mature enough to be able to deal with that. She's like a little child who just sees the world as icky, and she has a problem with it. And it's sad because she's literally destroying herself. It is what it is. But let's move past that subjective objective morality, I mean, and for the vegans who think morality is objective, and I tend to agree, okay, well then justify to me why it's objectively wrong to eat animals, right? But not plants. And then, since we agree, at least for the sake of the argument, that morality is objective, then we could go into the objective world around us. We could venture into that and talk about what's actually happening and why that's right or wrong, right? So, for example, Anna and Brian, which they shouldn't even have that argument if they were honest with themselves, because their whole entire worldview, I'm sorry, I will move past this in just a second. Their entire worldview is null and void, basically. But anyway, assuming that we agree that morality is objective, that there is objective truth out there, then they started talking about that which happens in the real world, right? So, for example, when Tristan questioned them about crop deaths and why is that okay, right? If killing animals, innocent animals, is murder, and me eating them is murder, then why is you killing animals to eat bread or whatever it is you eat, why is that not murder? Now, maybe he didn't say it in so many words, but that's where the conversation went. And I'm going off the top of my head. I only watched it once, so if I make some mistakes, you let me know. Maybe I'll reply to that with another video. But and Garland Farms was in the chat, looking for sound bites and wanting to get these vegans to commit to something, to tell the truth, right? Getting frustrated, as I was myself. Excuse me. Tell the fucking truth. Answer the fucking question. So when you ask them about crop deaths, they deflect, right? And they start talking about what's on your plate. But hold on a minute. Answer the damn question. Is what you're doing murder too, right? If killing innocent animals for food is murder, well, then you're killing innocent animals for food also, and you're committing murder. So within your own worldview, you're a murderer. If I'm a murderer for eating steak, you're a murderer for eating grain just the same. How is your murder virtuous, right? How is murder virtuous, period? How is what you're doing virtuous and what I'm doing not virtuous? And Anna's answer to that was, well, it's because there's like a degree of separation there, but essentially, right? You can lie to yourself, basically. There's enough degrees of separation there where you could lie to yourself. She didn't say that, but that's what she was saying, implying, right? Because that steak on your plate is literally the muscle of the animal that someone killed or you killed, whereas the animals that she murders, quote unquote murders, rot in the field and they go to waste, right? So you're less virtuous because at the very least, the animal that you kill, you venerate it to some degree by consuming it, right? And its energy, its life force, and the nutrition contained within its body. At the very least, you use it for something. Theirs rots in the goddamn field, right? They round up all the pigeons that they shoot, for example, and they let them rot. A lot of the times they do. So how is that more virtuous? Well, it's to her, it's more virtuous because she doesn't have to think about it. She doesn't see it. It's not on her plate. It doesn't make her feel, right? If you don't make her aware of this thing, she's able to block it out, right? And it doesn't feel like anything. So she needs to really be honest with herself and everybody around her and say that her entire worldview is based on subjective emotion. That's all that it is. Because if she can put enough separation between what's on her plate and the animals that had to die, if there's enough plausible deniability, if only subjectively in her own mind, then in her own mind she's virtuous, or more virtuous than you. It has nothing to do with logic or reality. It's all about her feelings. Does this make me feel bad? No. Why? Because I don't see these animals dying. Because I don't see their flesh in front of me on my plate. That's all that it is. It doesn't make any sense. Then they also ventured into evolution, right? And look, evolution is a belief, right? There is no proof of evolution. No one has ever been able to observe evolution. And what we have observed when it comes to people trying to convince us of evolution is a whole bunch of hoaxes and people trying to lie to us and convince us of this evolution existing as defined by Darwin. And a lot of people misuse the term anyway. But right, there's no proof for it. And there's a whole bunch of frauds trying to push this idea. So any logical and an honest person who's well informed about what's going on will at the very least question evolution, right? But whatever. They try to present empathy, right? Feeling as some kind of an evolutionary advantage, which is, so they try to use evolution to justify why we shouldn't kill animals, because we feel empathy, and it's good for us to feel empathy because it's an evolutionary adaptation that has allowed us to survive. Empathy, right? So empathy is how we're able to kill the animal that's have always been able to kill the animal that's, you know, trying to kill us. Empathy is what drove us to kill animals for food so that we became who we are, right? Empathy did that? Really? That's your evolutionary adaptation? Now, if we assume, and we don't even have to call it evolution, we could just talk about adaptation, right? And that's what we'll just say. What he calls evolution, they didn't really talk about evolution, to be honest. They talked about various adaptations. So if I am to take empathy as some kind of an adaptation that has allowed us to survive, I will agree to a degree, right? Because it has allowed us to, well, maintain families and tribes and take care of one another in a very, very small circle to a point where we were able to sow our seed and raise our young long enough for them to be able to do the same, right? That's all that empathy has allowed us to do. Well, I mean, other things also, don't get me wrong, but empathy for animals, even empathy for other humans that are outside of our tribe, I mean, in so many various instances, right, whether it was world wars or just tribal warfare, there was no, you needed to get rid of, you needed to go against whatever natural impulse for empathy you may have had in that instance in order to survive, right? So empathy in no way, shape, or form is this preeminent feeling that somehow this great adaptation to this world, because there are many instances in order for you to survive where you have to completely shed empathy. Now, don't get me wrong, empathy is useful in some instances, but in order for us to survive, we also have to be able to be logical, rational, put our feelings to the side, right? Forget about our fifis. It doesn't feel good, you know, killing another person. Even when they're trying to kill you, it doesn't, for most people, that shit doesn't feel good. We empathize with them, but we allow our reason and logic to, because we're emotionally mature enough to, you know, to unfortunately kill that person. And it might not be completely guilt free, but we eventually get over it because, well, it's dog eat dog, right? It's us or them. So to say that empathy is some kind of what has, like, there's not even any evolutionary, even if you assume evolution, none of these Darwinists, unless they're animal rights activists using to twist this theory and make it fit their own chaotic worldview, evolution does not make empathy some kind of preeminent result or a driver of evolution. It's not a very big part of our this evolutionary theory, empathy, that is, right? It's not about being nice to one another necessarily, or being nice to everything out there, basically, which is every sentient life form out there, which is what veganism is, right? Which is what it pretends to be. It's about spreading a fucking seed. And unfortunately, in many instances, before we were civilized, spreading our fucking seed entailed, in many cases, it entailed rape. You know what I mean? I guess. I think that's fair to say. So, you know, the only thing, according to this evolutionary theory, this is what evolutionists believe. The only thing that an organism, the thing that drives every single organism is survival. At no matter what, by all means necessary, survival and creating fertile offspring. Being able to survive long enough to procreate and keeping that cycle going. That's the only thing that all Darwinists agree evolution is I don't know how to say this. That's the only thing that matters, right? In evolution for an organism. Survival. So if we step into this Darwinist worldview, which these two didn't even really present for what it is, because they're not rational. They just blurt shit out because it feels good, basically. But if we are to step into their world and try to fit veganism into that, this evolutionary theory, and trying to fit veganism into that, well, you could implode it from within. And Tristan isn't necessarily the kind of person to do that because he has his very own strong core beliefs where he doesn't like to assume, he doesn't like to concede certain things if only for the sake of the argument. But I think it's a very good, it can be a very good tactic used to show how veganism is nonsensical. All you do is you step into the vegan worldview, you assume evolution or whatever the hell it is that they're talking about for a second, and you say this. Well, the domesticated bovine, the cow, is one of the most evolutionarily successful organisms on this planet. There are billions of them out there, and their survival is basically ensured by people who eat them. It doesn't matter whether their life is happy or sad or anything like that, right? If you're just looking at this through the lens of evolution, none of that matters. All that matters for this empty sack of always evolving cells, basically, all that matters is, spreading its seed and surviving and continuing its lineage. Haven't humans allowed the cow to become one of the most evolutionary successful, or you could say the symbiotic relationship between people and cattle or any domesticated animal? Hasn't it made that animal more evolutionarily successful? So right then and there, your whole theory of evolution, it justifies meat eating, not veganism, because veganism, you're basically telling this domesticated animal that's ill-equipped to live out there in the wild, you're basically telling this animal, you're shit out of luck, buddy. We're going to release you into the wild to live with, the pumas and the wolves and the lions and what have you. People who like to eat meat, hunters, we're just going to release you into the wild and you're on your own, right? Now, the cow might be able to adapt and survive fine, but its numbers are going to drop drastically and it's no longer going to be as successful as it is right now. And complete and utter eradication, genocide of the domesticated bovine species, however many there may or may not be, that's not out of the realm of possibilities if veganism is to get its way, right? These animals are going to most likely die out, or their numbers are definitely going to decrease dramatically, and they probably will die out. So what the fuck are you doing talking about evolution and what's evolutionarily, correct or incorrect, if you could even say that, right? Humans having developed these various breeds of cattle to give more milk or fattier milk, to have more meat on their bones, this and that, to be bigger and more docile, like having changed the physical characteristics of these animals. Well, isn't that exactly what evolution is? Right? If we step into this worldview, change over time in an organism, at the very least microevolution, right? We've allowed these animals to survive and vice versa, right? We've evolved alongside these animals and we've ensured each other's lot and chances of survival each other's lot to be, more successful and happier, and we've increased our chances of survival. So if you're a Darwinist, then this is a win-win on both sides. What the fuck does empathy have to do with any of this? Nothing, right? But these people aren't logical. They're not reasonable. They're all about fifis. So, and one last thing, like this whole idea of comparing, and vegans do this all the time, acting as if people were the same as animals, while at the same time saying, I'm not saying people are the same as animals. Yes, you are. Another contradiction, right? Because whenever you talk about killing an animal for food, it's like, well, would you kill a human being for, like, what? Or when Tristan said, well, most of the world believes, oh, a couple more things I just remembered. So at one point it seemed like Anna and Brian are okay with, they were proposing might is right. This ideology that if most of us, because morality is subjective, but if the overwhelming majority or just most of us agree that this is the correct course of action, then it's just for us to undertake this course of action at the cost of the people that disagree. Fuck them, because might is right. So if you have consensus or enough people agreeing to do something, well then it's just. Even though it's subjectively moral, it's still just because greater good or whatever, right? Well then Tristan turns around and says, well then most of the world eats meat. What are you doing? Why are you trying to change that? He didn't say this, he should have. But if you think might is right, then might eats meat. What are you doing? There's another contradiction within their worldview. And this, continuing from that, them comparing, this is how they compare people to animals, right? Tristan said, well, most of the world eats meat, so it must be correct, right? And then Brian would say something along the lines, well, most of the world used to think that slavery was okay. Now look, that's your belief. You don't have any sort of data to back that up. Just because certain rich people owed a whole bunch of poor people, that doesn't mean that poor people owned other poor people. And I think we could all agree that most people on the planet were poor. So you think the people that are more likely to be slaves, the majority, you think they were okay with slavery? No. History is written by the victors, and I think it's more logical to assume that the world was never okay with slavery, by and large. And most people were not okay with slavery, because most people did not want to be slaves. And just because they enslaved somebody else, perhaps, well, that doesn't mean that they were okay with it. It's just what they did, right? And the reason why most recently, let's say, white people enslaved black people, even though black people enslaved black people and white people too, but hey, let's not get into all that. It's the reason why the way people justified owning other people was to make them subhuman, to bring them down to the level of animals, right? So they considered, it was wrong, obviously, but they did not consider them human. That's why if they were able to justify owning other people, well, that's how they did it. Okay? So for Brian to say, well, you can't own animals because you can't own people, well, at what point did you assume that people are just like animals, right? Well, this is what his ideology leads to. It leads to human slavery, because he thinks people and animals are the same, at least on some level. I mean, then he'll turn around and say, oh, I don't think we're equal. Well, then we're not. Are we? Are we not? Right? If you're gonna sit there and act like owning animals is the same as owning other people, then how are we not equal in your mind, people and animals? And I think he even said it explicitly, that people are just animals. And Tristan was trying to draw that line, which is the logical, reasonable thing to do that most people actually agree with. They're just being dishonest. right? Because Brian would not take that chicken that they took into their house as his wife, right? Or woman. He wouldn't do that because it's not a woman, it's a chicken. But, at no point in the conversation did he ever justify why people and humans are the same, right? It's this the standard position, the logical position is that we're not the same. Okay, that's why it's not okay to treat people like animals, and it's okay to treat animals like animals. It is what it is. If you have a problem with the status quo, well, state your case and prove us wrong. You can't, because your whole entire worldview is based on a contradiction. It's in chaos. It's just your fifis. That's all that it is. So these guys, they didn't make any sense. They contradicted themselves a million times. They could not answer any hard questions because the logical conclusion of their ideology would have been, and people in the chat were driving to get them to do that, would have been that within their own worldview, the way they see themselves is as murderers and, just bad people. Your own ideology of veganism, if you are to apply it to yourself, not just project it onto other people, if you apply it to yourself, you're a murderer, okay? Because you kill innocent animals in order to eat. And you hadn't justified why that's okay, right? If they wanted to push this idea that, well, I kill fewer animals than you do. No, you don't. And anytime Tristan tried to talk about, the vegan kill cult, let's quote Garland Farms, they wanted to deflect and talk about the other side. They're in complete and utter denial. Cognitive dissonance. They want to separate their reality they want to separate their diet from reality. Because it makes them feel bad to know that they murder, as they themselves put it, innocent animals. That's what they do. That's what you guys do. You're murderers. According to your own fucking ideology, you guys are murderers. And you need to own up to that. And once you realize the conflict that your life is, that your ideology is, once you realize how chaotic all that is, how it doesn't make any sense, how it refutes itself, then, and you're still, and you believe you are honest people, then you will stop pushing veganism as some kind of a moral obligation. You'll stop acting like it's anything other than a dietary preference because you think meat is icky. That's all that this is. There's no other justification for why you do what you do to yourself, for making yourself suffer and age 20 years in the last 5. There's no justification for that. The reason why you do it is because you believe meat is icky. And I happen to think it's fucking delicious. So that's my video. I know I rambled a whole bunch, but these guys don't make any sense. They're living in denial. Cognitive dissonance is the name of the game when it comes to these two jokers, and their entire worldview is based in nothing but fifis. It's irrational and completely and utterly emotional. That's why it doesn't make any sense. That's why Brian is bitch made. He's like a girl. He's just, and I don't know if, his diet, a lot of people say that's what happens. I don't know. I don't care. But maybe his diet, is so estrogenic, it's literally turning him into a woman. Not just physically, but emotionally. There's this high-pitched voice sneaks, because his voice is pretty deep in general, but here and there, he just has that, that high-pitched squeak that just comes out, and his voice cracks as if he was still going through puberty, right? He's skinny, he looks weak to me, and his entire worldview is based on emotion. He's very effeminate. I mean, he puts product in his fucking hair. Why? You know what I mean? He's just, whatever, man. He's just an LA Metro basically, is what it is. I don't know if people still use these terms, but he's just a girl. Brian, you're just a girl. You need to be a man in this relationship, and you need to balance out your woman's emotionality with reason and logic. But you've allowed the female to take over and take over you, which is probably why you're fucking wearing guy liner. You worship the woman when you should love her. Instead of loving her and being yourself and being a man, you've decided to worship her. You've decided to venerate the woman and become one, if only to a degree. That's fucked up, dude. You need to be a man. You need to balance out all that emotion in your household with rationality. So when your wife doesn't make sense, it's not your turn to stop making sense. You need to bring her toward the center by being fucking rational. And if you don't, the two of you are just gonna fucking wither away or start sneaking meat on the DL because you ain't honest while pushing this bullshit online. So it doesn't matter if they're nice. It doesn't matter if you like them or you don't. None of that matters. What matters is whether or not they speak the truth. And they don't. They don't make any goddamn sense, and their entire worldview is in conflict, and they're walking, talking fucking contradictions. And whereas you can make an argument, Anna is... No, I won't even go there, because even though she's aged dramatically, and you could tell, like, she just has these... Her lips are starting to look like old lady lips. Her eyes definitely, like... I mean, there's... Doesn't she have that old lady lip thing going on? Her lips are just so shriveled up. Anyway, it is what it is, man. She's becoming manly insofar as she's becoming more angular, right? Whereas women are supposed to be, at least I think so, round and soft, curvaceous. She's become angular, and her man is just a bitch, Brian. You become a bitch. Anyway, time for me to stop bitching, and I think I shot my load. I don't have any parting thoughts, any words of wisdom to leave you with, which is why it's taking me forever to close this out, because I'm just so aggravated by the bullshit and the nonsense of these people. They don't make any sense. Their entire worldview is self-refuting, contradictory, and that's why they're living in chaos. And that's why, you know, the woman, if only in some respects, is becoming more like a man. And the man is becoming more and more effeminate. Like, they're just... Instead of realizing how different they are and using that to balance each other, they're looking to blend and become one, right? Literally, that's what's happening. And that which they're becoming is just old folks. Old folks who don't make any goddamn sense, right? They talk like they're senile. They're shriveled up and senile, and they're just blathering fools, man. Anyway, that's all I gotta say, man. I'm sorry it took me so long to fucking get this out, but I guess I've just been annoyed for so long by these two jokers, and that did not change when I heard them on Tristan's show, because they deflected everything. They wouldn't come correct. They rejected truth and reality, and they just, you know, they just continued on with their fifis. This is just how I feel. So you must feel the same way, because I say so. Get the fuck out of here. You guys need to, like, fuck, man. I do believe it's possible for them to be good people. I believe that it is possible for them to be good. But in order for you guys to be good, you first have to be logical. You have to be honest. You have to make sense. Otherwise, you will never be that which you hope so hard to be, and that is good. Okay? So stop rejecting reality, stop being dishonest, and build a strong foundation, objectively strong, objectively true foundation for your worldview. And in no time, you're going to be eating meat. That's what it is. Get over the fact that you think meat is icky. Get over that shit. Start telling the truth. And then you'll start living what's true. Okay? Because our true nature as that of carnivores. Okay? Men being men, women being women. And all of us, at least to some degree, carnivorous. Thanks for watching.